Chza suddenly said. Now he will be afraid of me. Ruby didn't understand why her father should be afraid of him, but Chza didn't mention it again, pulling Ruby to another place. Ruby didn't ask. How could she know the relationship between father and son? They went to see a play about the love story of a princess and a prince. The prince didn't understand why the princess wanted to leave him. The princess explained that because of her status, she had no choice but to push him away. The prince assured her that he would always love her, no matter what form she took. The princess then asked, "Even if I were a monster?" And she transformed, causing the prince to scream in terror. Ruby watched the play with an impassive face. Chza, sitting beside her, noticed her discomfort. He finally sighed, suggesting they return to the temple since they had things to discuss. Ruby knew what was coming. In the blink of an eye, they were back at the temple. Ruby sat wearily, hugging a pillow in front of a mirror. She kept consoling herself. This will pass quickly. I just need to endure it a little longer and it will be over. Ruby looked up at herself, resolutely making up her mind. If I endure it alone, everyone will be fine. As soon as she stepped outside, someone was waiting for her. "Yaha is waiting for you." Ruby said nothing, just silently followed the person. She realized this person's accent was distinctly southern, like she had heard it somewhere before. Ruby guessed he was Cesari's aide, but also a spy from Romania. At the first door, the mysterious person opened it, inviting Ruby inside. She saw a staircase leading upwards. The closer she got, the more tense Ruby felt. She had a bad feeling about this trip. Suddenly, a bang echoed. Ruby recognized it as the sound of the temple door. Standing before the entrance, Ruby froze. The mysterious person prompted, "Aren't you going in?" Ruby slowly stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind her. She stared in astonishment at the scene before her. Fine wind shimmered in the dim light. Chza sat elegantly, calmly greeting Ruby. Ruby couldn't help but ask, "Where is this?" Chza replied, "Where else but the Archbishop's room? That old man was quite flustered when I said I'd use it. Isn't that right, Petro?" The mysterious person revealed himself as none other than Petro. Ruby stared at him, her heart sinking, that deliberately hoarse voice. It instantly clicked. He was the one who had broken her leg. Chza sipped his wine and said to Petro, "You've worked hard in this pigsty." Petra immediately flattered him. "I've been eagerly waiting for Yaha. Do you know how much I've suffered from homesickness?" Ruby gritted her teeth. The reason Petro had stepped on her leg was to obstruct her wedding night. Had Chza ordered him to do it? Chza and Petro continued chatting casually. Chza asked, "Do you want me to cover for you?" Petro laughed. "I wouldn't refuse." Ruby hadn't expected to meet Cesari's aide here. If it were the Chza she knew, no matter what happened, there was no way to separate Petrok from him. Ruby also didn't think Chza would send an aide from the north just to monitor her. Chza continued their conversation. "You don't refuse, no remorse," he said coldly to Petro. "You haven't done anything right." Petra smirked. "I'll accept a separate punishment for that." Chza suddenly asked, "Ruby, what should I do with him? Tell me." Ruby didn't quite understand Cesari's meaning. He explained, "He's being scolded because of you." Ruby couldn't hide her surprise. "Have you been having him monitor me this whole time?" Chza took it for granted. My dear sister ran away from home. What brother wouldn't be worried? If what Chza said was true, then the time Petro came here was after Ruby's runaway incident. So, he had been monitoring her since then. Thinking about this, Ruby clenched her hands. At times like this, she had to think carefully. If she made a scene, all her previous efforts would be in vain. Ruby started questioning herself. Someone like me, who has never gone astray, how tired must I be to be driven to this point? "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked, voice trembling. "I was accused of poisoning the Archbishop's granddaughter at the Meston Temple. Everyone in the north sees me as a murderer." Ruby pointed at Petro. Until now, I thought you ordered him to do it. Then Ruby started crying, blaming Chza for not considering her feelings, and the mayor's daughter too. What do we gain by eliminating her? Ruby suddenly stopped. Chza turned to Petro and asked, "Do you know anything?" Petro honestly replied, "Not at all. I came here after hearing that she ran away from home, but I just heard about this too." Ruby's face darkened immediately as she remembered Freya's words. If Isaac inherits the throne, the future of the North will change, depending on his partner. Would she forever suffer from the interference of the corrupted believers? Were they so hurt that they could look her in the eye? Freya had said she would become the Queen of the North. She had poured tea on herself, skillfully weaving truth and lies. If Chza wasn't involved in the Mockstone incident, Ruby thought, then it could only have been my creation to drive me away and be with Isaac. And the shortest path for Freya to find the Mockstone. Petra whispered to Chza, "It seems the Archbishop has secretly eaten another bowl of rice behind our backs." Chza thought for a moment before replying, "Probably." He slowly walked toward Ruby. "I understand your suspicion, but even if you go beyond the limit, this is a bit too much. If we really wanted to assassinate her, would we choose the temple and the Mockstone? My poor sister, how scared were you that your judgment was so impaired?" Chza paused before continuing. "But that doesn't excuse your impulsive actions." Ruby explained. "I wasn't very clear-headed at the time, so I didn't think carefully." Chza gripped Ruby's shoulders and asked, "When your husband embraced you, were you not clear-headed either?" He stared at Ruby as if he wanted to devour her alive. Ruby stammered, "I've always been reflecting on myself." Chza wouldn't let her go. "Judging by your husband's appearance today, it seems this isn't a forced relationship, is it?" His tone turned almost commanding. "Tell me the truth." The force in his hands terrified Ruby. She didn't understand why Chza was so furious, even if she had ruined his plans, but her top priority was to not let Chza know her true feelings. Ruby began to act. "My husband is completely different from anyone I've ever met. Although he's treating me kindly now, I was scared to death back then. That's why it was like that." Chza pressed. "What about searching for you as if he was catching a Randall?" Ruby lost her composure and replied, "Do you think you did that because you were worried about me? How many times do I have to say it? I was really scared." Ruby cried, "Do you know I wanted to die because everyone was saying I was the same as that vicious Borgia girl?" Chza said coldly, "Did he hit you?" Ruby hadn't processed the question yet. She asked blankly, "What?" Chza glared menacingly and repeated, "Did that bastard dare to hit you?" Ruby still hadn't recovered. After a moment, she hurriedly explained, "I worked hard to please him, so he no longer treats me roughly. It was then that I realized the only thing I could do was survive. Survival was important to me at that time. If I could go back, I would do anything." Chza clenched his fist, then released it. He gently took Ruby's hand and said softly, "This place has been a burden to you from the beginning. I was afraid you would become like this, so I objected. This time, no matter what Father says, I won't care." But Cesari's tone suddenly changed and he scolded her, saying, "Even so, Ruby's use of desire to achieve her wishes was an act of utter disrespect. Not just anyone, but Kay's angel doing this. I can't accept it." Chza lifted Ruby's face, forcing her to look at him. He repeatedly asked, "Aren't you the Pope's only daughter? Why have you changed so much?" Ruby stammered, too frightened to retort. Without waiting for her answer, Chza continued, "Of course, I can't blame you alone. It seems this dirty and wicked cave has stained you into something useless. But why did you develop such bad habits in such a short time? We haven't seen each other in a while." He gently wiped away Ruby's tears, but his eyes were cruel as they stared at her. Finally, Chza let go of her hand, turning to nod at Petro. Chza believed that Ruby's self-reflection proved she could improve. A terrifying silence filled the air. Chza didn't say anything more. turning to fetch a whip. Ruby suddenly spoke up. "My husband will notice." Chza chuckled. "Don't you two have no time to see each other during the festival?" Ruby replied. "Isaac could come to me in the evening, even during the festival. Even if I lived in Angan Palace, if it were Isaac, he would definitely come." Chza didn't seem to care. He approached Ruby, telling her to behave as usual. Did he really have to teach her those things again? Chza ordered, "Lie face down on the table and lift your skirt. I have to correct all your bad habits. Don't hate me, it's all because I care about you too much." Ruby trembled with fear. Chza held the whip and began his cold words, brainwashing her. "Your husband is blinded by lust. Since your wedding night, he's acted as if he'd give you all his affection. But don't forget, Ruby, feelings born from the body cannot last. Even with physical contact, feelings don't just sprout." After whipping Ruby thoroughly, Chza gently caressed her face. "Since you're so tired, I'll give you a solution. If your husband treats you so badly, then come back today and say you'll stay with your brother." Ruby felt nothing but extreme pain and exhaustion. She couldn't take it anymore. Instinctively, she cried out and begged Chza for forgiveness, but he didn't seem to have any intention of letting her go. Violently, he forced her to look him in the eye. Chza cruelly announced, "Tonight will be a long night, sister." Afterward, only the sound of the whip repeatedly striking Ruby remained in the room. It snowed heavily that night. Isaac sat on the balcony when he heard his sister call. Ellen rushed to Isaac, asking about Ruby's whereabouts. He replied, "She's watching the festival street with Cardinal Valentino." Ellen couldn't hide her surprise. She questioned, "Why did you ask me to observe if you were letting them go so easily?" Isaac explained, "I need to find out something in return. I sent Camus and Gaia to the festival streets." Ellen still couldn't understand her brother, clearly anxious enough to shake her legs, but still letting them go together. "A blizzard is coming, and I don't know when Ruby will be back." As soon as she finished speaking, the sound of a carriage came from below. Both of them ran to look. It was the carriage that had carried Ruby and Chza earlier that day. Isaac didn't dare delay, rushing down to greet Ruby. Chza was helping Ruby out of the carriage. Seeing Isaac approach, he greeted him. Isaac said, displeased, "You're lucky you arrived before the snow started falling." Chza lied without blinking. "Ruby fell while playing. I was busy treating her, so we were late." Isaac worriedly asked, "Is Ruby hurt?" Ruby smiled and replied, "Just minor scratches." Isaac whispered to her, "Be more careful." Ruby smiled as usual, explaining that she had been too excited watching the festival. Isaac placed his coat over her shoulders and reminded her to get treatment before going to bed. Ruby obediently listened, but despite her efforts to cover it with her hair, Isaac noticed her red eyes. He kept asking about her, making Chza, standing beside them, uncomfortable. Chza stepped forward, placing his hand on Ruby's shoulder. Using the excuse that Ruby was tired, he wanted to take her back, reminding Isaac about his match the next morning. Isaac looked at him coldly, expressing his intention to take Ruby back no matter what. Chza readily agreed. Before leaving, he told Isaac to take good care of Ruby. Isaac took Ruby back in the carriage. Ruby didn't speak to Isaac, as usual, just silently looking at the scenery outside, her face expressionless. This worried Isaac even more. He spoke first. "You look tired." Ruby gave a tired smile. "Because I used all my energy playing." Isaac suddenly stood up and then sat next to Ruby. Ruby didn't understand what he meant. Isaac patted his thigh, telling Ruby she could lie down and rest for a while. His eyes held only infinite love and tenderness for her. Looking at Isaac like that, Ruby felt her heart stir again. Letting go of everything, she wearily laid down on Isaac's thigh. He didn't say anything, just gently brushed her hair aside to make her more comfortable. Although he had many questions in his mind, he couldn't bring himself to pressure her. The two of them remained like that until they arrived back at the castle. Isaac carefully carried Ruby all the way to her room. He wanted to call a maid to attend to her, but Ruby immediately refused, saying she wanted to bathe alone today. Isaac was still worried, concerned that if she bathed herself, she would aggravate her scratches. Ruby smiled reassuringly. I'm really okay. Looking at her like that, Isaac froze for a moment, knowing she was lying. He asked directly, "Did something happen, Ruby?" But Ruby still didn't want to say. She replied wearily, "There are days like this. Today, I just want to be alone." At this point, Isaac couldn't do anything more. His hands, wanting to reach out, could only clench helplessly. He didn't try to pry any further, only reminding her to treat her injuries well and get plenty of rest. Ruby obediently said, "Of course." After giving his instructions, Isaac left, lost in thought. Suddenly, Ruby called him back, encouraging him, "Do your best tomorrow." Isaac slightly bowed, a smile managing to break through his disappointment. He agreed with her, though only after he was out of sight did Ruby close the door. The last of her pretense crumbled. She sank to the floor, terrified. Cesari's voice echoed relentlessly in her mind. "Remember, Ruby, even with physical contact, feelings will develop. Compared to a scoundrel, this is something a human shouldn't do." Ruby only dared to express her feelings silently. She was so scared, trembling, that she couldn't even tell Isaac the truth, the one who loved her most in the world, because she feared that without her mask, she would lose the affection she had worked so hard to maintain. She gently clasped her hands together, as if praying to God, asking for forgiveness on Isaac's behalf. Meanwhile, Isaac was sitting in the carriage, already knowing Ruby had lied. He had realized it a long time ago, because every time she lied, she gave a small, nervous smile. Isaac blamed himself. If only I had asked one more question, maybe Ruby would have told me the truth. But I was afraid she would break down, so I kept my mouth shut. He recalled his conversation with his subordinates. They had lost track of Ruby midway. She and Chza had donned monastic robes and headed straight for a temple. The temple gates were closed every night, and when they arrived it was already locked, leaving them no choice but to wait outside. When Ruby and Chza came out, they seemed perfectly normal, but because they had spent quite a bit of time inside, Isaac couldn't shake his suspicion. They must have been praying for something. Isaac thought for a moment and found their conclusion reasonable. Yet one issue still lingered. A very shady figure had entered the temple with them, someone with a large scar on their face. Isaac immediately pressed his subordinates to ask if they could recognize the person if they saw them again. Isaac remembered Ruby's exhausted appearance and the redness around her eyes. He didn't understand why letting her go out had resulted in this, but no matter what had happened, he would always be by her side. Despite his efforts, the distance between them kept growing. Looking out at the quiet night, Isaac finally voiced his thoughts. "Tell me what I can do for you." The next morning, the stadium's atmosphere was hotter than ever, buzzing with eager anticipation. Murmurs and cheers filled the air, while black birds circled overhead. Ellen and Freya van Fuana were both in attendance, their expressions tense. Freya, glancing at the seating arrangement, whispered, "I don't want to sound like a nitpicker, but isn't this a bit strange?" Ellen's face was sombre as she gestured. "Look over there. Shouldn't the madam be sitting in this direction? But now she's seated with the cardinal on the other side. Duke Viola Alfonso and Ruby are seated together." Freya, lowering her voice, murmured, "Indeed, the rumours are true." She whispered in Ellen's ear, "You haven't heard about it either?" Ellen, annoyed, glared at Freya. "That's none of your business." Freya was irked but pressed on. "Do you feel any regret?" Ellen, her voice calm, replied, "There's no reason to interfere in other people's family affairs." Freya retorted, "Is there any reason to talk about this?" Ellen, clutching her fan tightly, shot back, "Besides, Ruby is my family. If you do this again in front of me, don't speak to me anymore." Freya was left speechless, turning away, muttering, "I just thought everyone was talking about it." Ellen sighed, thinking there were many things she wanted to ask Freya, but she knew it would only benefit her. "After the festival ends, I'll try to have a proper conversation with her," Ellen resolved. she shifted her focus to Duke Alfonso and Ruby's platform. Alfonso, noticing Ruby's discomfort, asked kindly, "Are you cold?" "No, I'm fine," Ruby replied. He gently added, "If you feel uncomfortable in this position, let me know." Ruby smiled and said, "Everything's comfortable. However, I'm quite worried that people will criticize us for violating etiquette." Alfonso reassured her, "You haven't done anything to be criticized for." Ruby looked toward the audience with worried eyes. "I don't mean my brother-in-law sitting in the audience seats. King Fennel is sitting with Duke Omar. Even my father, who values authority greatly, has no objection to the current seating arrangement. There's no real problem, but the reason they never object is probably because I'm not truly part of yet." Suddenly, Alfonso noticed something. His brother-in-law. There he was. The door opened and cheers of joy erupted from the crowd. Eagerly they awaited the festival's start as the knights stepped onto the stage, ready to showcase their skills. Isaac and his warhorse appeared, and Ruby was taken aback. She watched in surprise as Isaac and the other knights rode past, greeting the audience. People reached out, hoping to shake their hands. An announcement echoed. "Now is the time for the handing over of handkerchiefs." Ruby fidgeted, her eyes fixed on Isaac. She felt a sense of relief. "Thankfully, I remembered the novel's contents, and thankfully, I prepared it." Isaac passed by her, calling her softly. His eyes were full of affection. Ruby blushed, flustered by the attention. Isaac asked tenderly, "Are you feeling better?" "Yes, thanks to you. I slept very well," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. Isaac looked at her expectantly, and Ruby handed him a beautifully embroidered handkerchief. He was surprised, and Ruby poured her heart into her words. "This holds my heartfelt wish for your safety and well-being, that you won't be injured." Isaac accepted the gift, and Ruby's heart swelled with joy. He kissed her hand gently and smiled. "Thank you, Ruby." He then turned to continue his ride, but Ruby's gaze followed him, reluctant to look away. Alfonso, who had been watching, asked curiously, "Does this happen often?" Ruby was caught off guard. She wasn't sure how to respond, but Alfonso continued, "I wonder if you two often exchange gestures like that." Ruby simply smiled in reply, her hands clasped nervously as she tried to shift the conversation. An announcement rang out. "A pledge of fairness and a blessing for all." Alfonso raised an eyebrow, noticing her nervousness. "What's the matter?" Ruby responded with a light smile. "If you're the one who had me sit next to you, you should be content with it." The priest stood up and solemnly performed the ritual. Sergei focused on the ceremony, as did Alfonso. A solemn atmosphere filled the stadium as a protective shield was erected to keep the audience safe from the monsters. This large-scale measure had to be maintained until the end of the match. The cardinals were no longer needed. Alfonso and Ruby clasped their hands and prayed in unison. "Amen." Following the church's ritual, the announcer made another announcement. "There will be a total of 2 gladiator matches today." Ruby's hands clenched. "Anyway, this damned festival will be over soon. I hope Chza quickly becomes Romana without any incidents. God willing. Amen." As she passed by the restroom, Ruby overheard people discussing and predicting the outcome of the match. "I don't know why, but I have a feeling this year's winner will come from the north," one person said. Her friend cheerfully replied, "It's still too early to tell. The Rembrandt faction won the previous match, didn't they? Lord Omta didn't participate, and the Doris faction candidate also performed quite well. You know, I didn't have high expectations, but let's wait and see." Behind the door, Ruby heard everything, feeling some relief upon hearing people's faith in the Omta faction. She quietly opened the door a crack, thinking to herself, "There's probably no one here now, right?" The sound of running water filled the air. Ruby winced as she thought, "Lately, I've been vomiting less, but I feel more pain than usual." She opened her small bag, inside which were some candies she had prepared. Footsteps approached. It was Ellen. Both of them were surprised to see each other there. Ruby froze, wondering, what should I do? I'm still embarrassed to look Ellen in the eye. Wait, could Ellen have noticed my vomiting? As she awkwardly chewed on candy, she hoped Ellen didn't know. Ellen, ever observant, asked, "How do you feel about today's match?" Ruby was caught off guard. Actually, I'm very nervous, especially when the monsters appeared. I was so worried something might happen to Isaac. The monsters I saw in the arena today are clearly much different from the ones I've encountered before, she said with a sigh. Maybe that's why I feel more uneasy. Ellen nodded in understanding. I get it, but you don't need to worry too much. The year my brother W competed, it was much scarier. Ruby's eyes widened. Is that so? Fortunately, Isaac returned without a scratch, but today the abilities of some of the other candidates are still a mystery. Ruby looked at Ellen, surprised that she was talking to her so casually. I thought it would be difficult to talk to Ellen after the tea party, but I'm grateful she's being so friendly. Ellen's gaze shifted, and noticing Ruby's discomfort, she hurriedly said, I'm done here. I'll excuse myself. Suddenly, Ellen called out to Ruby. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Ruby turned, surprised. What do you mean? Ellen clutched her bag tightly. Oh, nothing. Then I'll excuse myself. Before Ruby could respond, she quickly slammed the door shut. Ellen paused for a moment, a wave of regret washing over her. The match ended and the luxurious banquet hosted by the Omerta family began. Ruby was present, but her mind was elsewhere. There's someone I never want to see again in my life. She sat at the same table as Chza, who smiled warmly when he recognized her. Ruby returned a faint smile, but inside she was uneasy. Is it because Isaac isn't here? I keep feeling violated. The tournament for the swordsman had lasted 2 consecutive days. Leaving the palace now would be considered cheating and could result in disqualification, so the swordsman had to remain there. Ruby stood up and bowed politely, then sat down at the table, still feeling anxious. If only Isaac were here. As the banquet continued, Ruby was startled by Duke's voice. We welcome Lady Rhea. She politely responded, respectful outwardly but uncomfortable inwardly. What kind of monstrous combination is this? The man I haven't married yet, who's become a eunuch, my current father-in-law, and Chza, the cause of all this? Alfonso whispered to her. Right, I have something to discuss with Duke Omas, so I stayed. Ruby was taken aback, embarrassed. It seems like I'm the only one who feels uncomfortable here. Omerta turned to Ruby and asked, Madam, I heard this is your first time watching the tournament. What do you think? Ruby answered readily, trying to mask her discomfort. All the participants were even more amazing than I imagined. But I'm scared. Omerta nodded understandingly. You don't need to worry about my son. If he were easily eliminated in a bland match like today's, would the Pope send his precious daughter to our house? Chza chimed in. It's truly impossible to doubt the Duke's discerning eye, but to be honest, I'm also quite worried about my brother-in-law. Do you also feel the same way, Ruby? The atmosphere grew stifling, and Ruby could feel her unease growing. In this situation, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold back my words, she thought, so I'll just shut my mouth with food. Chza turned to her and said, By the way, I must say this girl is really lucky. Even though she's my sister, I envy her for finding such a good husband. Duke replied proudly, You flatter me. Compared to the extravagant style of the South, this place is a bit shabby. Speaking of which, Rembrandt Castle. Chza started, and everyone at the table shuddered, pleading, Please, don't say any more. Alfonso conversed with Chza. I thought Ganir would accompany you on this trip, but it seems he's busy. Chza replied, You get along well with my brother. He made a fuss insisting he wanted to come along, and my father had a hard time stopping him. Why? Alfonso asked. Chza smirked. If Enzo had come here, he would have definitely flirted around everywhere. Alfonso sighed. He's still full of energy, isn't he? Anyway, it would have been better if he had come. He hesitated for a moment before pausing again. He noticed Ruby, who was eating heartily amidst the banquet's conversation, her mouth full as she continued to eat. Everyone at the table glanced at her with surprise, and Alfonso was no exception. He asked, bewildered, "Are you very hungry?" Ruby, with a full mouth, answered with a choked voice, "I was a little stressed today." Alfonso nodded, understanding, and quickly covered for her. "Ah, because you were so stressed you didn't eat properly, right?" Duke Ohm, who had been watching Ruby with a keen eye, added, "Don't just eat bread, try the shepherd's pie." Ruby froze in surprise. The portion was so large that she normally wouldn't even dare to consider it. "I'll just eat this until the conversation ends." Outside the door, Ellen, who had been watching from a distance, saw Ruby eating continuously without stopping. Ellen was puzzled. This girl is too much. She watched her for a long time, her curiosity growing. "I've never seen her crave food like this before. Impossible." Ruby kept eating without pause, and Ellen felt a pang of worry. "No way. Ruby and my mother are different."